with Eva Garland Consulting. And so even though my personal background is in neuroscience, and I have helped small businesses and academics alike obtain about 500 or $55 million in non-dilutive funding through a variety of agencies, including NIH, NSF, DoD, and the ARPA-H. And so just a little bit about Eva Garland Consulting. We help our clients secure and manage their non-dilutive funding, and we have been in business for over 10 years. And in that time, we've helped our clients obtain over $2 billion in non-dilutive funding. And our clients come from all over the country and also the world. We have clients in over 25 countries. And we have office space in North Carolina and in Southern California as well. And so we have three main ways that we help our clients. So first is to identify opportunities. We help our clients also develop top tier, high quality proposals. And then once you receive that funding, we also have an accounting and compliance team who helps you manage that money. And so I just want to highlight some resources that we have available to help you outside of this webinar. So we have a series of winning SBIR, STTR grant books that are all available through Amazon. And so we have our 10-week plan for an NIH phase 1, a 10-week plan for our NSF phase 1, and then our 12-week plan for NIH phase 2. We also have a very extensive collection of funding opportunity resources. So on our website, evagarland.com/resources, we have these global funding programs. So you can check that out to see different opportunities outside of the US. We also have a very extensive list of private foundations that offer funding, and then also state resources with this interactive map where you can click on the state that you're in and see what sort of opportunities and resources are available to small businesses. We also offer our funding alert email, and so this is a free service. You sign up and then input your areas of interest, and then we will send you emails only whenever there is a new opportunity. So it's not like you're going to be getting emails every day from us, but these will also include federal, state, and local opportunities. And so you can either go to evagarland.com/EGC-funding-alerts, or you can follow this QR code. And again, the slides will be made available after today. So, okay, so just a very quick overview of today's talk. We'll go through some differences between SBIR, STTR. We'll talk about how to apply for NSF and then the actual application components. And then we'll have some time for questions and answers at the end. As Sandy mentioned, if you have any questions, feel free to put them in the chat. I do have one of my colleagues, Dr. Alyssa Becker here, who will be helping me answer questions throughout the talk, and then we'll answer some more at the end of my presentation. Okay, so if you're unfamiliar with the SBIR STTR program, it's essentially non-dilutive funding for small businesses specifically. So this is money set aside only for small businesses, and at NSF, this occurs in a few different phases. So phase 1, you can request about $305,000 for a project that lasts 6 to 18 months, and that is to help you de-risk your technology, your innovation, or demonstrate proof of concept. That then enables you to go into phase 2 to continue developing your technology, focusing on how you might scale that up, if there are any regulatory issues that you need to consider. And phase 2 allows you up to 2 years of funding, with a little over $1 million. And then NSF does offer phase 2B. So this is after you've completed your phase 2 project. If you still need additional funding, they do offer a some like additional stopgap money before you're kind of pushed out of the nest, as it were, with phase three. The only thing with NSF, this phase two late stage development money, is that NSF does require a 50% match of external funds, so typically non-federal funds. I'm going to go through some of this a little bit quickly, but feel free to drop questions in the chat. But so NSF is looking to fund innovative solutions that are addressing a significant unmet need and that also have a significant commercial potential. So you really need to have something that is going to be addressing limitations of current standard of care or limitations of other current technologies. They'll also be looking for your team to have expertise and the potential for success. So you're going to want to have team members who are experts in basically every aspect of your application. And then also, if you have an advisory board that can help you with like the business side as well as the science side, especially if you are going to need to go through regulatory considerations. So NSF really likes to fund applications that are from startups with very little private investment. So if you have just started and you have a project that you have this idea, but you just need a little bit of money to demonstrate proof of concept, and investor companies or VCs are not interested. They want to see you demonstrate that proof of concept before. NSF SBIR STTR is probably going to be a great fit for you. NSF really values itself, their SBIR STTR program, of being basically a catalyst for small businesses to launch their innovations. So if you already have quite a bit of funding from private investors, this might not be the best fit for you. But if you are early stage, this could be a great fit for you. So I'm going to go through these really quickly, but just the main differences between SBIR and STTR for NSF. SBIR, you do not need to have a nonprofit research partner. Both in STTR, you're required to, and so that can be a university or a hospital system. There are some differences in how you can use your budget between the two. So for SBIR, about 2/3 of the budget needs to go to the small business, whereas with STTR, 40% needs to go to the small business, 30% needs to go to your partnered research institution, and the remaining 30% can be used however you see fit. In both cases, the PI needs to be either, well, for the SBIR, the PI needs to be employed primarily by the small business, which means at least 51%. But with the STTR, the PI, so the leader of the project, the principal investigator, can either be with the small business or the partnering research institution. So if you are a spinout from a university, or you haven't left a university position and you're interested in starting a business, the STTR program is a good option for you because you can still maintain your university affiliation and employment. With the SBIR option, you're not allowed to have a co-PI, but for the STTR, at least one co-PI is required. And if that co-PI, if the PI is not from the partnering research institution, then they need to be the co-PI. So someone from that partnering institution needs to be on that team one way or the other. And then for both the SBIR and STTR, the principal investigator must devote at least 1 calendar month per 6 months of performance. So if you have a year that you're requesting for your project, then you need to dedicate at least 2 calendar months of effort to your project. Okay, so now we'll move into how do you actually start to apply for an NSF SBIR STTR, and what are some considerations that you need to be aware of. So first, you should really understand who is going to be reviewing your application. So when you submit your full application, the review panel is going to be made up of academics, professionals, and entrepreneurs, and your project needs to appeal to all three. And so academics are going to be looking for rigorous experimental plans. If you have publications or if you have a good understanding of the field that your project falls into. Professionals are going to be looking for you to have a clear understanding of the unmet need. And if you, for example, if you are developing a medical device, understanding how that might be reimbursed through insurance, and to understand why are people going to use this new tool instead of what is currently available. And then entrepreneurs are going to be looking for you to have an understanding of how you're actually going to run your business once you get launched. And they will also want you to demonstrate the commercial potential. So with NSF, commercial potential is a very, very big thing. So you need to, especially with the phase one, you will want to try to have at least a little bit of customer discovery to demonstrate that there is a market for the innovation that you're developing. So this is just going a little comparison between a traditional academic grant application versus an SBIR, STTR. And so for a small business grant, you're going to really want to be looking to advance an industry. NSF reviews applications with these three main criteria: intellectual merit, broader impacts, and commercial impact. So intellectual merit is the idea rooted in it could be the literature, it could be preliminary data. You just need to have compelling evidence to suggest that your project is likely to be successful. Broader impacts that it advances your industry, or also the US's independence from other countries, and then commercial impact that you are addressing an unmet need, and that it is likely going to be, again, addressing some sort of limitation with what is currently available. Okay, so the way you first need to submit a project pitch in order to be accepted for a full application. And so the project pitch is essentially like a pre-application and comes to about 3 pages of text. And this is submitted online. You do not need any additional special registrations to submit a project pitch except registering for the submission portal. Um, and the contents of the project pitch, basically you have some administrative information, who you are, and then the relevant NSF topic. And so I've included some URLs here. And so NSF has a pretty broad category of areas that they're interested in. And then the different sections are going to be your technology innovation. And so this is where you're going to describe what it is that you're developing and how it addresses an unmet need. The next section, technical objectives and challenges. So this is where you're going to outline what exactly you're proposing to do in your project and why it is risky, essentially. So why do you need to do this work in order to advance your technology? There's also a brief section for market opportunity. So what is the commercial potential for your project? And then another short section for your company and team. So this is where you'll want to highlight any key team members who are going to be driving the project. And so first you need to, again, submit that project pitch. Usually takes NSF about a month or less to review the pitch. Currently, we are seeing some delays in the review process given the government shutdown, but we have seen people receive responses within just a few weeks of submitting their pitch. And so there are three different responses. So either you'll immediately have your project pitch accepted, you might get a request for additional information, or your pitch might be outright rejected. If you get the request for additional information, then again, you can either be accepted or rejected after that. Sometimes the request for additional information really goes into them trying to understand what exactly you need to do with your project, so expanding on the technical objectives or describing the unmet need a little bit more clearly. Once your pitch is accepted, you have two application due dates to submit your full application. And so the next due date is November 5th, and we are, again, waiting for the shutdown to be resolved so that the fiscal year 2026 budget is released. And once that budget is released, we anticipate NSF to release another solicitation for their SBIR STTR program. And we would anticipate the next deadline after November 5th to be in March 2026. If your project pitch is rejected, then you have to wait until the next submission window to submit another one. Or if you submit your project pitch, it is accepted, you have to wait until your full application is reviewed before you can submit a new pitch. Okay, so now we're going to get into the meat of the application. So first, I really want to encourage you to read the solicitation, and this is linked here. And it is a bit extensive, but they do provide very specific questions that your application should address throughout the different components, and it provides very detailed instructions for your entire application. Some general grant writing tips is to try to use some of the same phrases that are used in the solicitation to indicate how and where you're responding to the specific criteria that reviewers are going to be looking for. Excuse me. You should also try to present your material as simply and easily to understand as possible. So you can anticipate that your reviewers will have a scientific background, but they may not have the exact background as you do. So you want to be careful with not providing enough information, but then providing too much information. So it's this really fine balance of walking that line of providing just enough for the reviewers to understand how you're going to complete your project, why it's important, and not providing too much on either side or too little. Another great tip is to not leave anything up to interpretation. Try to explicitly lead your reader through every step. So this is something that as you're working on your own science, your own technology, you understand what you're trying to do, you know what you're trying to say, but sometimes that leads to gaps in what you're actually writing because you understand how you got from point A to point, let's say E, right? But a reader who is not as familiar with what you're doing might be very lost without that basically hand holding through that A, B, C, D to E step. So I think I have in here a little bit later too, actually. Yep. And the next point is to have someone else read your proposal to help catch those gaps in the logical flow and identify any areas that they might have questions. Likely your reviewers will have the same sort of questions and will likely catch the same issues that another reader who is it could be someone who's within your company, outside of your company, if they have a little bit of knowledge of what you're trying to do or have absolutely no idea what you're trying to do. as long as it's not someone, I would recommend not having someone who is involved in preparing the application with you have reading, being that like second reader, because they're likely to have those same sort of gaps and understanding of, well, I know what you mean here. So if you can have someone who is a little bit removed, just one or two steps removed from what you're doing, read your application, that really helps to identify these gaps. Okay, so I'm gonna pause here just very briefly. This screen will come up as we move through these different components, but these are all of the components that you'll need to include in your application. And so you can see the project description is basically the meat of your application. It's going to be about 10 to 15 pages, minimum 10, maximum 15, and it has very specific sections and headers, and we'll walk through all of those in just a moment. And then hopefully we'll have time to get through as much of the rest of this as possible. But if not, these slides will be made available after the presentation today. So each of these sections, so for example, intellectual merit, they need to be a header on a line by themselves. Otherwise, the NSF submission portal will not accept your project description. As we move through, I'll also have different recommended page links for the different sections. So as you can see, the intellectual merit is recommended to be 7 to 10 pages of your 10 to 15 pages. So this is where you need to spend quite a bit of time. And again, if you review the solicitation, there are very specific questions that NSF is looking for you to answer. And so some of these include highlighting what is the unmet need that you are tackling and what is the innovation of what you're doing. So what makes it different? How is this going to transform the area that you're trying to break into in some way? Why is it going to be different? So this is where you want to really talk about the value proposition, the competitive advantage. So really demonstrating what is unique about what you're doing compared to what is currently available. You'll also want to describe what your current stage of development is at. So do you have a prototype? Are you looking to build your prototype? Is this just an idea? Have you done some bench testing? So give your reviewers an understanding of where you're currently at, and that will set you up for the stage of where you're going. The reviewers will also be looking for technical risks and barriers. So what is currently preventing you from being able to advance your technology? And then ideally, this will be how you're mitigating these risks in the actual application. And so the technical risks should be the same as those that you describe in your project pitch. And the overall goal of your, their technical objectives that you're going to be writing up in this application should also be exactly what you highlighted in your project pitch. It is sometimes there is a little bit of delay between when your project pitch is accepted and when you finally submit your full application. And if there is any gap between or any changes between what you proposed in your project pitch and what you now need to propose in your full application, strongly recommend that you reach out to the program director who responded to your project pitch and let them know of these updates, because as you may have seen on that list of items that needs to be included in your full application is your accepted project pitch email that highlights the project that was accepted. So your reviewers are also going to be looking at, okay, is this what you proposed to do in your pitch? And if it's substantially different, that can get your application withdrawn. And then the rest of your intellectual merit section will be your research and development plan. And so this is essentially going to be what are you doing? How are you doing it? And so you'll be outlining your timeline. So how long is each technical objective going to take? What are the milestones or metrics of success? So how do you know that you've successfully completed the objective that you've outlined? What are some potential issues that might come up with what you're proposing, and how could you mitigate those issues if they do arise? And this is also where you can outline any preliminary data if you have them. For phase one SBIR, STTR, preliminary data are not required, but it does really help your application if you do have some preliminary data. If you do not have any data whatsoever, then you really want to use this space to justify your idea through scientific literature, or to bolster the idea that you have. So basically walk the reader through how did you come up with this idea, and that will lead into how you're going to then test your idea in the R&D plan. And then for your preliminary data, if you do have them, that can highlight what needs to happen next and lead into your R&D plan. So for some tips and tricks for this section, you are allowed to work with human subjects and vertebrate animals with an NSF SBIR STTR, but there are not separate documents as if you're familiar with NIH. Those are separate supporting documents for NIH applications, but with NSF, all of that sort of information needs to be included in the R&D plan. It doesn't need to be extensive in the way that you would for an NIH application, but you need to indicate that you have plans in place for either an IRB or IACUC approval, and then just really describe as in-depth as possible what would be happening with the vertebrate animals or your human subjects. You'll also want to provide as much detail as possible for your preliminary data in your R&D plan as you might for a publication. So you really want to highlight how you're planning to analyze the data, or how the data were analyzed, your methods in as much detail as possible, and demonstrating the rigor. So that means, what sort of controls do you have in place? How many times do you plan to replicate your study? Or how many times did you replicate your preliminary data, and what sort of controls did you have for those preliminary studies as well? And then quantifiable metrics of success. So reviewers will be looking for really concrete details so they know that you know when your objective has been met. So for example, if you're looking to, let's say, improve efficiency of prototype, that is certainly a good goal to strive for, but what does that mean to you? By how much are you seeking to improve your prototype? So let's say your prototype is currently, I'm just making up numbers here, 30% efficient compared to your comparator. And you want to improve your efficiency up to 80%. How are you going to do that? How are you measuring that? And how do you know that you've met the criteria that you're setting out for yourself, so that you can then move on to the next step? So I know a lot of projects are often very iterative. So if you do have an iterative project, what is your stopping point? At what point do you stop iterating? And then finally, try to use figures, graphs, charts, bolding, underlying, any sort of text enhancements to try to break up your text, so that you're not producing pages of just blocks of text, because reviewers will be reading through a lot of different applications, and this is a great way to fatigue your reviewer, and you really want to have a friendly reviewer. So if you have just 10 to 15 pages of just text, that's likely going to put them in a bad mood. So if you can break up your pages at all, I strongly encourage you to do that. All right, the next section within your project description is going to be company and team. And again, this is going to need to be its own header within the project description document. And it is, we recommend about 1 to 2 pages for this section. And this should summarize the team that you've pulled together, and particularly those who are going to be participating in the project that you're proposing. And so, for example, if you're developing a medical device, you're going to want somebody who has experience creating medical devices. You're going to want to have someone who is in the clinical space for the device that you're developing, so that you have that clinical perspective. It also lends weight to the idea of your technology being used within the clinic. You might also want to highlight any business advisors that can help you with commercialization or for additional business development activities later on. But it's really important to have within your team someone who has expertise for essentially everything that you're proposing. So if you are not an engineer, but you are going to be working with an engineering firm to help you develop your technology, it would be really good for you to also include perhaps a consultant who has an engineering background who can help assess what the engineering firm is doing on your behalf. So it doesn't, the people don't necessarily need to be employed by your company except for the principal investigator. They can serve as consultants, but you just want to demonstrate that you've got that knowledge within your team. You also want to describe your vision for your company over the next 5 years. So detailing what you anticipate your business model to be, if you have any other projects in the works, and just how is this project going to help your company in the future? If you have existing operations, summarize those and how the current program fits into those activities. So if you have received funding previously, whether it is through other federal grants or investor funds, you want to highlight where has that money gone, and why does this particular grant, why do you need this particular grant if you already have additional money? So if you want to highlight, well, we received $50,000 to first develop our prototype, and now we need an additional 300,000 to iterate and improve on our prototype. That's a great place to do that here. And then you also want to provide some background information on your company. And if you have received any money, so you can kind of see how some of these sections and information start to work with each other. So if you're summarizing your existing operations, you can also drop in there your revenue history if you have any, and how that money has been used and how that fits into your overall business operations and business model for the future. Some tips for this section. If you have a good story of how your company was founded, strongly recommend that you include it. If you have like a personal connection to the area that you're in, or the story of how you came up with the idea, it can really help to give the reviewers insight into you as an individual, instead of just being another paper application that they're reading. As I mentioned in the previous slide, make sure your team covers all of the media expertise needed for your proposed project and any potential downstream activities, including commercial expertise, or if you are developing a device or some technology that needs to be approved, that you have someone who has that regulatory experience as well. And then again, if you have previous commercial experience or previous funding, you really want to explain why you need NSF's money. They are, again, very interested in being a catalyst for small businesses. And so they really want to see what is the impact that their money will have. Okay, so then we also have broader impacts as part of your project description. This should be about 1 to 2 pages, and this will uh, this often is a difficult section for companies to write because it can be a little vague, of like, well, I'm not entirely sure how this will have an impact beyond like this immediate need. But you can use this section to describe the motivation that your company had to develop this project, to take this project on. You can also start to talk about how is it going to help society in a broader sense, and if there's an economic benefit, um, which communities will benefit, and what is the timeline that they'll start to see that benefit. And then if you are looking to advance some sort of societal benefit, if you have an ability to measure and track that, identifying that in this section goes a long way. So for example, if one big thing that NSF likes is to see an increase in STEM participation. So if you're able to quantify how you can potentially increase participation in STEM, that would be really good in this section. And something else too is if your technology has the potential to be misused or have a negative impact or an unintended impact, for example, a negative environmental impact might have issues for national security or supply chain issues, make sure you're also describing how you're working to minimize any of those unintended consequences. And so some tips for that section. NSF has some guidance on their broader impacts at this link here. And then these questions are the ones that reviewers are going to need to answer about this particular section. So if you can help answer those questions in your broader impact section, that helps the reviewers answer these questions for you as well. Okay, next section is going to be commercialization potential. And so this is where you're going to really describe how you plan to launch this as a business endeavor. Um, and again, NSF really is looking for you to have a good understanding of the commercialization potential of your project, even at this early stage. So customer discovery efforts go a really long way for NSF at even at phase 1. So you'll want to have an idea of how you're going to develop your business model. You're going to want to summarize the market that you're trying to break into, how your market needs were validated, and any potential risks associated with the market, for example, adoption. And this is, again, where customer discovery comes in very handy. You want to essentially provide a convincing argument that you are developing something with a strong commercial value, that there is a place for what you're developing. And you can also, they'll also be looking for you to have revenue potential estimates. And it's okay if it is, very if it's pretty far in the future of when you might start generating revenue. You just want to outline what are the assumptions that you're making in order to get this estimate of your revenue potential. And you're not going to be held to this exactly, right? So no one from NSF is going to come to you in like 10 years and be like, okay, well, did you follow this exactly as you stated in your phase 1? And this is something that should and can evolve as you proceed with your project. So this is, again, just for NSF to see that you're thinking about this and how you are looking to advance your company and your technology once you have de-risked it through this project. Again, if you have any regulatory issues that will need to be considered, or like, for example, environmental safety considerations, you'll want to highlight that here as well. You'll also really want to highlight any strategy that you have for your IP, or if you have IP protected already. you want to describe that here, and then describe your competitive landscape. So again, what is your competitive advantage? What are the key advantages to your technology? Okay. I see we're at 10 minutes, so we're just gonna wrap this one up and then we can open to questions and answers. But some tips for this section is to really do market research. So what is the size? If you're familiar with TAM, SAM, SOM, you want to have some of that information in your application. What are market drivers? What are constraints? What are risks? How are you going to mitigate these risks? Identify your value proposition and what makes you different from your competitors. And you are always going to have competitors, even if it's not someone doing something similar to what you're doing. It is, what are people doing right now, with what you're trying to improve. And again, if you've validated your market, if you have done market research, if you've done customer discovery, if you've talked with potential end users, highlight that in this section. And that will help provide support for not only what you're developing, but the commercial potential. And if you also have met with, like, if you have a business advisor that has helped you develop your business model, describe that. And again, if you have IP, explicitly state that you have protections on your intellectual property. And if you don't currently have it, have a plan in place and be able to describe that.